But boundaries are something that have to be demonstrated. They cannot be, you can't, because when you talk about boundaries, I think a lot of people say, well, if you don't discuss the boundaries, if you don't tell what the rules are, then they're, when they break them, you can't expect people to know what you have to have this open communication shit. And I'm of the opinion that that's kind of bullshit. And while I do understand the logic behind it, it's really negotiation is what it is. And I can count on the fingers of one hand how many times I have actually had to establish or vocalize a boundary with my wife in the last 28 years. And I'll tell you the story about that if you'd like, because I'm a really good storyteller, right? But before I do, I have to give you the example that I usually talk about when this is a very, very, very common situation. Yeah, thank you. I'm fairly sure. Yeah, Steven Crowder can't be bought either. Thank God, right? Boundaries have to have teeth. They have to have that. There has to be a sharpened knife somewhere. There has to be consequences, because if all you ever do is talk about boundaries, that's all it is talk. And what will happen is those boundaries will be tested, they'll be passed, they'll be crossed. If you forgive after that, if there's not some sort of zero tolerance, if there's not a tolerance, a line in the sand, right? If there's not a thin red line, then you might as well not even have the conversation. That's why I keep saying that it's not about the conversation. It's not about you need to have open communication. Well, yeah, I hate the fucking line about open communication, because it presumes that all you have to do is just be talking and be communicating. It's like, no, it's what you're communicating. It's not that you're communicating. That's easy. I can talk to anybody, right? It's what's coming. What are the words coming out of my mouth? What is the information that's being transferred? It's the same thing when I see, and Andrew Wilson falls into this trap now and then, but not on his own accord, but he falls in this trap. I have too. So, mea culpa as well. Is that when you sort of get yourself sort of worked up and you get yourself emotionally involved in sort of an exchange, you don't understand that the information that's being passed is not about the tone of the information. It's the information itself. So I love it when women go, well, Rollo, people would really they would listen to you more, Rollo, if you said it like you were talking to a fourth grader. Right? You're the teacher. Okay, everybody sit around. We're going to use our inside voices now. And we're going to talk about hypergamy and how, women alpha fucks and beta bucks. And if we talked about that and we delivered it in this nice, sweet, syrupy, saccharine, tone, that women would be more open to listening to what you have to say. And it's like, no, it's not. It's what the fuck you're saying. That's offensive. It's not how it's delivered. And so when, Andrew Wilson has a very, let's just say, rough around the edges delivery. And when he makes these comments to the girls on whatever podcast, that's almost always the same. That's almost always the first thing that comes out of the mouth. Your tone could be different. And it's basically just tone policing at that point. But it's not even tone policing. It's the fact of what he's saying. They don't have it causes a cognitive dissonance that they just simply don't have any way to cope with, or they don't have any way to sort of to resolve that cognitive dissonance, because you get to a point where it's like your hypocrisy or whatever it is that you've been talking about is so blatant and is so obvious that you don't have a comeback for it. The first thing, the first resort you're going to use is, how is this being delivered? Am I feeling attacked by this? Is he being snarky? And women will use snark in a sec. Imagine this. Imagine me having to deal with sort of a what I would presume would be sort of an empirical debate, but everything that's being thrown at me by a woman is you and your little friends at the Red Pill and your little group and your little podcast and your little this and your if it's this sort of constant snark going on. If I stopped and say, you know what? You would be more convincing if you would just drop the snark and your tone was different. Imagine me, right, trying to say what the first resort for most women is, which is your tone could be different, right? And if I was to say that, it's a sign of weakness. Like, oh, you can't take it on the chin. You're not a real man. You can't, you can't actually, you can't knuckle under. What are you afraid? Were you threatened by a strong, independent woman? Those would be the answers, right? So there's always going to be that sort of disconnect between men and women when talking about these things. But the short version of this, or I should say the easier way to understand